welcome to your F1 weekend warm-up ahead of the final race for 2022. It's the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, and we're getting excited. I'm joined by James Hinchcliffe and Lawrence Barretto. Guys, the lights are on, the sun has gone down, it's Thursday, there's been a lot going on here. Hinch, great to have you back on the team. You've never been to the Yas Marina circuit.
I haven't. It was always on the bucket list for me just to see as a fan. So getting now to see it, from this angle and be working with you guys is great. I'm really excited.
Well, you say this angle, you've actually been out on track, laying down a few skid marks. Do I say
Yes,
that?
no, that's technically accurate. Yeah, Jolie and I were foolishly given keys to a car again, and we got to do some hot laps. So you'll get to see that in the pre-show on Sundays. We managed to find out where the traction control was, so it was a little bit more spirited than the one we did in Austin. So I think this will be a better one.
Awesome. Can't wait to check that out. As Hinch says, Sunday, keep your eyes peeled for that in our pre-race show. And Lawrence, you and I made the trek. Actually, you went back via the UK to Abu Dhabi. It only seems like moments ago that we were in Brazil. Suddenly here we are, and it's the season finale, and there's still so much to look forward to.
Oh, definitely. There's such a buzz actually around Abu Dhabi.
Abu Dhabi. That's been happening to a lot of people today. Brains are melting in the heat.
It was such a great race weekend last year for many reasons, but there's a different feel about the place I think this year, and the great weather's helped. It was like 30 degrees today, so it was scorching
34
hot.
by my watch.
Jeez, so very tasty. Thankfully, the sun's gone down. It's much cooler here, more palatable. But yeah, there's so much to talk about. Okay, the championships are done, but there's P2 in both constructors and drivers to fight over. Plenty of positions in the Constructors' Championship were super important because of the prize money that's available. So we've got tons to talk about.
And I think last week really got us excited because suddenly Mercedes back in the fight, and it's meant that this weekend is really exciting still. Things haven't been wrapped up yet, which brings us nicely on to the 60-second wrap-up. You thought I was going to start chatting about last weekend a bit more, but no. No. 60 seconds to tell us all about Brazil.
So hard.
Tricky. Do you want to do sprint as well, or are we just going Grand Prix?
I think we'll go Grand Prix.
Full main course. Okay, here we go.
But the tragedy of that, though, is you got to cut out qualifying as well, which was such a cool story.
We'll just summarise that as it was great.
Magnussen was on pole. Okay, anyway.
Here we go. Hinch with the clock. 3, 2, 1, go.
George Russell in P1, great starting spot for him. Further back, there was a great battle between Lewis and Max. These guys are like magnets. There was contact. Both of them suffered damage. Lewis dropped to 9th, fought his way back up to P2 because George basically ran away with this race. 2 safety car restarts, he nailed them both. First was to Daniel Ricciardo and Kevin Magnussen contact. Lando Norris retired as well, so that was another safety car. Further back, Carlos Sainz got on the podium. Charles Leclerc asked Ferrari, could he get past? They didn't tell Carlos that, they just ignored that. Carlos kept the podium. Charles Leclerc fought up his way up to 4th, having been in the wall earlier in the race. Incredible. Fernando Alonso was right at the back, ended up 5th. Incredible drive. I'm going to leave it there, I think, because I think I've been doing pretty well, right?
You've done incredibly well.
And so much time to spare. Do you want to talk about the sprint race for 15 seconds?
Give us the prequel. Take us back in time.
It was just generally, though, in all seriousness, a great race, wasn't it? I think there was so much going on through the field. Those fightbacks like Fernando and Charles coming through. That last safety car kind of lit things up a little bit. People could use their fresher tyres to come through. But even so, some really great racing out there.
And lots for us to talk about coming into this weekend in Abu Dhabi. But first and foremost, when I woke up this morning, a little lie-in, because at about 9 o'clock Abu Dhabi time, Haas announced, finally, their driver lineup for 2023. We're still pending on Williams, of course, still need the proper signature for Logan Sargent, but Haas, the big talking point today, Nico Hülkenberg coming back to Formula One, another comeback. I love it. But also equally sad, Mick Schumacher leaving F1. You've been alluding to sort of thinking that was what was happening, Lawrence.
I have,
so I'm guessing not a surprise for you this morning.
No, it wasn't so much of a surprise, just because I think for the last 3 or 4 months, Nico Hülkenberg really came onto the radar. Gunter met him several times to discuss it. There was a contract ready to go. It was just a case of Gunter deciding if he wanted to hit go on that or whether Mick had done enough really to save himself. And they really did give Mick all the time in the world really to prove that he could do. But ultimately, they need to go for experience, I think. They need to make sure they get those points on the board. Like, Mick only scored a third of what Kevin managed to do this year, and they're fighting for 2 points in the Constructors' Championship with AlphaTauri. So those points really matter, and they need the prize money because they need the money for the development because they're not pushing the budget cap yet. So it's really important that they get an experienced driver, and that's why Nico Hülkenberg's coming back.
And Hinch, you know what it's like, driver negotiations, driver market. There's always gossip. How hard must it have been for Mick, probably knowing that was coming down the track, when all eyes were on him. Every time he made a tiny error or he did something well, we were like, oh, that serves him well. Oh, that's not a good good time to do that. Difficult for him, and how surprised are you at the comeback for Nico?
Yeah, I mean, as a driver, you're kind of always keeping that mental balance sheet, right? When you're in a contract year, everything you do well, you're like, all right, check on that side of the column, and then, there's the pros and cons, every mistake you make, obviously the other way. And he had a couple big mistakes on the early side of the year, and I think that really, dented the chances. He had those points finishes back-to-back in Silverstone and Austria, maybe ebbing and flowing back the other direction, but ultimately I think the draw of Nico was just a little bit too much. And that really comes off the back of these super sub performances that he's had. You think about a driver that's been out of the sport for 2 years. Obviously, Fernando did it, came back. We saw Kimi do it, come back. Both of those guys came back with the pace to still do it. So as long as the motivation's there for Nico, we saw him jump into those, those fill and rolls for Aston and for was it
Racing Point
at the time? Yeah.
And just absolutely, nail it. Very, very impressive performances. So the pace is still there. Like I said, if the motivation, the desire is still there, you can't fault the decision. You understand why they went that way.
There are a few question marks, of course. There was that moment in the media pen in Hungary a few years ago between Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg. But I'm assured that they're friends now. They've been chatting. Even when he was back in the super sub role earlier this year, apparently Kevin and Nico were chatting away on the drivers' parade. So let's hear what Kevin Magnussen has to say about the news breaking today that his future teammate will be Nico Hülkenberg. So 2023 Haas driver lineup is confirmed.
It's exciting and also sad at the same time because I like Mick and had a good time with him this year, and I think he's done a good job at the end of the day, and certainly wish him all the best. And I think it's I know better than most that you can come back even though you lose your place on the grid. So wish him all the best, and also looking forward to starting working with Nico and getting him on board. He's a very experienced driver, and I think that's hopefully going to be a big asset to the team. And we've had a fun season this year, and looking forward to hopefully taking another step forward next year.
You guys have had your moments, you and Nico Hülkenberg. I think a lot of people are excited to see how you guys work together. What do you think will be the way of working at Haas with you?
I'm sure it's going to be fine. I think in the beginning of the year was the first time I really actually spoke to Nico. We met in the airport and had a short chat on the drivers' parade in Bahrain, and that was kind of the first time we laughed about what happened back then in Hungary, and it's a funny thing that has been joked about many times since. So it's going to be fun.
Another driver leaving Formula One at the end of 22 is Nicholas Latifi. And I think we'll all be sad to see him go. He's been a lovely person to have in the paddock and has had some good standout results when perhaps people were thinking his time was up. Alex was quite sad about talking about Nicholas's leaving or his departure, because they're good friends.
Yeah, they've gotten really well together when they've been partnered up, and you can see when they do the silly things the team get them to do for all their content and stuff, and when we get them together as well. They genuinely like each other, so I think there is some sadness there that Nicky's leaving, but obviously the team have had to make a decision from a performance level.
And I think, perhaps just starting in a different direction, new strategy for next year with a new driver coming in, which we think will be Logan Sargent. He'll be here this weekend.
He will. He's got a little bit of work to do. He's still got to get all the super license points, so he's going to run FP1, or is he not doing that this weekend?
So
I think he is. He was telling me the logistics seem quite intense.
Because he's got to go from FP1 to
F2. Yeah. So he's got to run FP1, get his 100 kilometers, get that point, and then he's only got to finish, was it 6th in the championship?
Sixth, as long as he finishes top 6.
Yeah.
Either way, he's 3rd at the moment, so...
But it's quite close, so it's not signed, sealed, delivered, but I'm
They made it easier for him.
For sure.
By running him in Brazil, which we all had slightly written off as an opportunity because of the sprint format. But I have to say, I do laugh, because he's like, hopefully someone can bring the car over from the F2 paddock, which is kind of over there, then he's got to be in the F1 pit lane to start for the F2 session. So it's a lot to get your head around when you're under pressure as a driver.
But it's a good problem to have. And drivers thrive under pressure. I think he'll be just fine.
Absolutely. Well, we touched on Haas a little earlier on with Kevin Magnussen now knowing that he'll have Nico Hülkenberg in the car next to him in 2023. The battle still going on between Haas and AlphaTauri. You are repping the brand. I'm surprised you're not driving for the brand, quite frankly, about how much stash you've got. Another driver, of course, switching teams, Pierre Gasly, also feeling slightly emotional, I think, because we've spoken about it for a while now. Now we've sort of known about his move to Alpine for a couple of months, but it's starting to set in, isn't it now?
Yeah, I think actually this weekend was the first real moment where he's realised that the people that he's been around for the last decade, the Red Bull family, he's about to say goodbye to them. There's a certain familiarity, isn't there, when you've had that amount of time with one group of people. But he's excited about the future. He knows Alpine, if he wants to be making the steps he does in his career, he has to move to Alpine. Look at the form that they're in at the minute. He wants to be fighting regularly for podiums and hopefully more in the future. And so I think he'll probably make the best of it. The saddest thing for him, I think, is going to be leaving Yuki. Just seeing them earlier.
Such good friends.
They're like hugging each other all the time, taking the mick out of each other. And for them not to spend that much time together, it's going to be really quite changing for them.
I'm quite pleased as well that actually Pierre is taking part this weekend, because a lot of us were panicking that the penalty points, sorry, I'm so used to talking about super license points, penalty points, were mounting up, and suddenly he might not actually see out his time at AlphaTauri. Thank goodness for that, Hinch.
Well, yeah, absolutely. You don't want to miss your last race with a team, especially one that he's got the history with, like AlphaTauri. But at the same time, he's not out of the woods until May. I know there's a lot of discussion about revisiting some of these penalty points rules over the winter, maybe retroactively taking some of the non-driving etiquette transgressions out of the mix, things like track limits and safety car procedures, things like that. And I agree with that. I mean, but if they don't change it, yeah, the first, 5 races of his Aston Martin career are going to be, Alpine career. Too many A teams, AlphaTauri, Aston Martin, Alfa Romeo, give me a break. Yes, his new team, wherever they are. But no, you're going to have to be careful. You don't, as much as you don't want to miss your last race with AlphaTauri, you don't want to miss one of your first 5 with Alpine either.
Best behaviour for Pierre Gasly. Let's hear from Pierre now, talking on his last weekend with AlphaTauri.
It's hard because I've been all my Formula One years with these guys and with this team, and the last 5 years I've spent more time with them than my own family, my brothers, parents, anyone else, and I know these guys personally, and it's definitely closing a chapter. I've tried not to think about the end and thinking about that feeling Sunday night when I leave the paddock and won't see these guys in a similar way that I've been experiencing these last 5 years. But for sure, Sunday when I'll put the race suit on for one last time and go racing, is going to be a unique feeling.
And how do you hope the story ends this weekend then?
In the ideal world, we're finishing in the points and beating us in the last race. At the end, yeah, we'll give everything we have. We'll throw everything at it, and I think what's important is just to, we'll celebrate Sunday night no matter what, no matter how the race goes. And we have had incredible times and moments in the past 5 years. I'm happy and proud to leave the team as their second race winner and being part of the race winner club with Seb Vettel. Definitely feels special, and I think it was hell of a ride, but definitely enjoyed all these years. Yeah.
Of course, Pierre Gasly is going to Alpine because Fernando Alonso is leaving Alpine to go to Aston Martin. Ta-da! Here we are, behind Aston Martin's garage. A big weekend for them as well. Sebastian Vettel leaving Formula One. Everybody I've spoken to, all the drivers, they seem to have had a personal moment with Sebastian as well. They might have had some lovely racing on track, but it seems like he's taken time with every single one of them to give advice, to be there when they need him for a little, sort of not a shoulder to cry on, but to give sort of his thoughts on how to deal with stuff. Amazing as a driver to have that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the ultimate sign of respect among your peers, right? And Vettel's one of these interesting cases where he sort of came on the scene kicking, his first race he got points, and then youngest world champion 4 in a row. Maybe rubbed some people the wrong way during that phase, but it was really interesting to see him kind of mature, not just as a driver, but as a human, I think, off track, outside the car, through the Ferrari years, and especially these last 2 seasons. I think the bonds that he's, formed with some of the, not just drivers, people in the series, people with other teams, there's just an incredible amount of respect for this guy. He's going to be so missed by everyone in the paddock, everybody watching around the world at home. He's done an incredible amount for this sport, and will continue to, I think, for this sport and for the world. I mean, he's hell-bent on saving the world as well, which is just awesome. So it's not going to be the same without him. One of the most successful drivers in history, and sad to lose him, but excited for his next chapter.
Absolutely, and I think a lot of drivers also alluding to the fact that they're expecting to see him back in this paddock soon, and I just don't know what that means, Lawrence.
So I think what will probably happen
There
is
we
he'll
go, gospel,
away
gospel.
thinking that he doesn't want to come back. I think he'll go away the first few months. He'll go, I want to spend time with my family, do a lot of the projects that we've seen him do, but really focus on them, and then realise, actually, I quite miss it because I've spent so much time in the paddock. So I do think that in some way we will see him. Probably not on the media side, probably more in terms of an operational side of the team, because he has always been very involved. Like the mechanics always say, he spends evenings very late with them, trying to find out what's gone on, trying to understand the changes that they're making. So he'll probably have a really good understanding of how to operate a Formula One team, and I think we will see him back once his kids have grown up a little bit. I'm pretty certain of that. I think so, because I'm sad that he's going.
I want to call him the Super Sub Seb, or the Super Seb. See, it's got
Only
a
at
headline
Suzuka.
right there.
Super sub
Super
Seb
Seb.
at Suzuka exclusively.
Oh, say that
Very
without
good.
your teeth in. Of course, they are embroiled in a battle with Alfa Romeo. Alfa Romeo leading the charge on that one by 5 points. When actually Alfa Romeo have struggled this year a little bit. There's been some stability issues, some reliability issues. Of course, Joe having a big crash. But I think Valtteri and Joe both reflect on their year in a positive way, actually.
I
Would you
think
agree?
so. Yeah, I think Alfa Romeo as a team have taken a step forward this year. They had to turn the taps off on development midway through the year when costs they weren't expecting, like the freight came in. They were like, well, we just can't afford it if we're going to. This isn't how much money we've got. Then they turned them back on and they brought this front and rear wing to the track, and it's really started to work in the last couple of races. And they've got a great development battle with Aston Martin, who are really getting their car working as well. So it's actually a really exciting battle watching the two of them kind of go backwards and forwards, track specific, seeing who's doing better. 5 points in it, I think, in that, and 6 in the championship. Super important for a team like Alfa Romeo, spent so long in the doldrums towards the back of the grid, and super important for these guys because Lawrence Stroll just doesn't want the team and the back end of the grid.
Absolutely
So
not.
6 will, not be what he wants, but at least it's the step towards where he's trying to get to.
Just a quick word on Fred Vasseur. I'm a bit nervous about the future there. Is it with Alfa Romeo? Is it with Ferrari? Why is this rumour suddenly bubbled up?
So there were reports this week, specifically in Italy, that were saying that Mattia Binotto won't be with the team and that Fred Vasseur would be the one who replaced him. Ferrari came out very quickly and said, there's nothing in those rumours. Charles was then asked in the press conference, specifically, it's interesting, isn't it, that even if that's not true, isn't it interesting that that story is out there? Is that, what's the reasons behind it? And they're all staying quite tight-lipped. I look at it as the sense that, okay, it's been a bad year for Ferrari in that they haven't been able to maintain that challenge to fight for the championship. But look where they were last year. So they've still made a massive step forward this year. And Ferrari, if they do make changes, they've got to be certain that whoever they bring in to replace Mattia, if they do choose to do that, is the right person. Otherwise, what's the point for change's sake?
And you don't want it to become a revolving door,
No,
do you?
exactly. And that's what Mattia has done really well at that team, is he's settled everyone down, he's improved the culture. That culture of fear that has long existed at Ferrari isn't there anymore. People are enjoying working for him. So I think you've got to be certain that he isn't the right guy if you're going to get rid of him. So let's watch his space. At the moment, he's still in his position. The team is saying he's going nowhere, so let's see what happens.
Well, let's hear from Zhou Guanyu, who has just completed or is about to complete his first year with Alfa Romeo and his first year in Formula One. Let's hear how he's reflecting on the last 12 months. Looking back over 2022, what are you giving yourself out of 10, Joe?
7, I think.
7?
Yeah, it's a reasonably okay score because I definitely wanted to achieve a bit more on paper, but it's no lie to say that a few DNF occasions we lost maybe just around 8 to 10 points, which is hurt a bit. But then we was able to let the paddock, let the people see the ability of myself. So that's a good side, or most important part. And to achieve all the objects we set so far from the beginning of the season, I've been achieve, let's say, Q2, Q3 points, so making sure a bit more consistent next year, and we shall be good.
Last weekend was, quite frankly, torrid for McLaren, I would say, starting with Lando Norris's bout of food poisoning. He tells me he's got better. He's been recovering over the last few days, and that gap between Alpine and McLaren now is a little bit too big to bridge. 19 points, surely Alpine have got it in the bag, Hinch.
Yeah, we were talking about this a few races ago, how we thought this one was going to play out. And I think we all sort of agreed the pace of the Alpine, even though the reliability wasn't there, the pace was just what gave you the confidence to do it. You go to Brazil, Saturday, it looked like it was all going wrong. McLaren, we had Lando in the points in the sprint race. Daniel was starting just outside the top 10, looked like it was squaring up nicely for them. Alpine's running into each other, both starting at the back for Sunday. but then a complete role reversal. Dan out on lap 1, mechanical for Lando, and both guys, we talked about Fernando going all the way up to 5th, but you can't discredit Ocon's drive either. Incredible, up from 16th, 8th into the points. So they really pulled it out when it counted. It looked like it was all going awry, and it was really going to come down to a tight battle here. I really think the gap now, 19 points, just too much.
And of course, a 3-place grid penalty for Daniel Ricciardo as well on account of his collision with Kevin Magnussen, which was sort of his fault. And then, of course, the actual collection, that was it was just circumstantial, wasn't it? But puts them on the back foot on a weekend where they really need everything to go right. But I think waving goodbye to that P4.
I think so. I think it's just a little bit too late to try and gather that amount of points, and like they'd have to have such a strong result in their own right and then hope Alpine don't score. And yeah, anything can happen. We've seen a Mercedes 1-2 in Brazil, and probably no one was thinking about that. But I think for these guys to maybe snatch it at the death, I think even the team are probably starting to understand that that might be a bit of a stretch too far.
It's a bounce back, but Alpine, you got to hand it to them. Despite the intra-team woes, they have been great this year. The car has been, well, quite frankly, indestructible as well, as we saw in Austin. They've put on a show when they need to. Just this weekend, they need to keep it nice and clean so that the media headlines are simply they've taken P4. No teammate shenanigans.
Right, yeah, and Fernando brought up a good point, I thought, after Brazil. He goes, you made a big deal about everything on Saturday, but look over the 2 years that him and Esteban have been teammates. They've had no problems. This is not like some ongoing issue. But massive credit to everyone at Alpine for the car they built. It's very fast, very indestructible from the outside. From the inside of the car, they've had some reliability issues, not as indestructible in that sense. And so to that same extent, you almost have to give McLaren a big pat on the back as well, because the car is nowhere near the pace. And the fact that they were even in this conversation for this battle this late in the season, they're doing a lot right. But the potential, I think, in this team is huge. I'm really excited to see what they can come back with for 2023, because they've got such a solid base, sort the reliability out, find a little more pace over the winter. This could be a team to watch for 23.
Yeah, a lot of points left on the table by Fernando Alonso, I think. And I think Esteban was a little hurt by the words that Fernando did say from the cockpit, I think, over the weekend in Brazil, saying that just one more race now and then it's over. Esteban doesn't feel the same way. I had a little chat with him earlier on in the media pen. I think he's hoping that they can deliver a great performance together as a team to take that P4 in the constructors' standings. You guys have got the momentum. Last weekend was fabulous. Have you got what it takes to hang on and keep McLaren at bay?
Yeah, I think it is definitely our target for this weekend. We have a little caution arriving here with quite a few points, but you know, it's never over until it's over. So we are going to be pushing hard, trying to focus on ourselves and doing the best job we can. Scoring some points would be good, and that's what we'll do.
And of course, Fernando was, he chose his words carefully, I imagine, but saying one more race and then finally it's over. Do you feel the same way about that? You're kind of actually looking forward to a last race with Fernando at part of the team?
I was, it's not a secret that I was disappointed in seeing his comments after the race. There was, no need for some criticism that he has done. But as I said, I respect him a lot. I will forever respect him for what he has done on the track over his years. He's a legend of the sport, and that won't change. But I was a bit disappointed.
We mentioned at the beginning of the show that the battle for P2 in both the drivers' and the constructors' standings is still wide open. And it's not really wide open because Checo and Charles are on level points, 290 points apiece. Charles leading on countback. So this weekend, my goodness me, it's going to be spicy. And let's just rewind a little bit because things got very spicy in Brazil. The Perez-Verstappen saga with would he let Perez through or not, meaning Max. We all came away from Brazil slightly uncertain. There were a lot of stories suddenly cropping up of things that may have gone on in the sort of parts of the season none of us were privy to. Since then, Lawrence, Red Bull have come out with a statement, and Max was quizzed in the press conference, and I think fairly frustrated with the line of questioning that some of the media are continuing to push his way. Yeah,
and also frustrated with, I think, some of the reaction on social media towards him, his family, and the Red Bull team as well. And Red Bull were very strong, actually, in their statement, saying that kind of language, death threats, things like that, is unacceptable. Of course it
Absolutely.
is. And he shouldn't have to be put up with it. And I think Red Bull are hoping that the statement and what Max said in the press conference will kind of draw a line on everything. And internally, they say they've sorted it out. They won't tell us exactly what they've sorted out and what they've agreed. But as far as I see it, Max has said publicly, I will help Checo if needs be in Abu Dhabi. So let's see if he is required to do that here, because Checo might need some help around here if he is to beat Charles, and it's very important for Red Bull to get P2 in the championship. They've never got P1, P2 in the championship, so it'd be a massive thing for them. So I'm interested to see how it's going to unfold this weekend.
Yes, the Mexican Minister of Defense, Checo Perez, in 2021, requiring the assistance of a teammate this year. So he just needs to finish ahead of Charles. That is all it takes. So, Max, what do we reckon?
Well, I mean, it's let the best man win at this point, right? It's the exact same situation that Lewis and Max found himself in a year ago at this race. And the only thing, you look back at Brazil, and so much focus was on, the Red Bull lack of, driver orders, team orders. But the same thing happened at Ferrari, right? Let's not forget that Charles was on the radio saying, hey, can we swap with Carlos? And they didn't let it happen. They had their reasons. They thought it was too risky because Fernando was sitting right behind Leclerc at the time. But I'm almost glad that if in Brazil one team didn't do it, neither team did it. I think it would have been worse had Ferrari let it happen and it didn't happen at Red Bull. Sergio's coming in on the back foot kind of unfairly. Same vice versa. So the fact that neither team did it, I almost feel better about it. And now it really just comes down to may the best man win. It's going to be a great battle to watch. And, it's exciting that, fine, the championship's done, constructors is done, but there's still a lot of good driver battles and constructors battles going on.
Oh, I'm so excited. And of course, we've got more to talk about in the constructors. But first, let's hear from Charles Leclerc, who's also been clearing up some rumours about his team boss's future, Mattia Binotto, as we mentioned earlier on. But a big weekend for Charles and Ferrari and Checo and Red Bull. First and foremost, let's clear up the rumours about Mattia Binotto. What's your reaction to what everyone's been talking about his future at the team?
Well, I mean, obviously there are always a lot of rumours around the team, and especially coming to that time of the year. Having said that, we need to focus on ourselves. We've got a season to finish, for now there are only speculations and rumours like it's been for the rest of the year. So hopefully we will finish on a high. I think people tend to forget how much of a step we've done from last year to this year. Yes, it's been a difficult season overall, but on the other hand, it's been a massive step forward from last year to this year. And we'll try to keep working very hard, working on our weak points, not focusing on all the noise around the team at the moment.
And finally, P2 obviously is what you've got your eyes on. You currently are P2 through Countback. Do you and Carlos chat about that privately to just make sure you both are aligned, or do you have to have the team there when you talk about things like switching places?
Well, I mean, everybody has to be on board. So as we did before Mexico, we had already spoke about it, and then the race was a bit trickier than what we thought, so it was not possible. Sorry, not in Mexico. I keep saying Mexico.
Don't worry.
In Brazil. Before Brazil, we spoke about it.
Mexico was quite tricky too.
Yes, it was too, but we hadn't talked about it before. We did before Brazil, so everything was clear. Then obviously with the adrenaline, the heat of the moment, I was a bit frustrated on the radio, but nothing serious. And again, it's very clear what we want to achieve here: second place in the drivers and constructors championship, and we'll make everything for it to happen.
Mercedes and Ferrari, that's the battle in the constructors standings that I think a lot of people are going to be focusing on this weekend. 19 points between them. It's a long shot. We've already spoken about that gap between Alpine and McLaren. That seemed undoable. Mercedes need to win, fastest lap, everything to outscore Ferrari. It seems a bit tricky, but the momentum they've got at the moment, Hinch, Mercedes are on a comeback.
Legitimately in the fight for victory for 3 races in a row, pulled it off last week, a 1-2. I don't think anybody really predicted a Mercedes 1-2 at any point in this season. So it's a tall order, yes. Brazil was incredible for them. You got to give Ferrari a lot of credit for damage control. The fact that Mercedes had a 1-2, Ferrari responded with a 3rd, 4th. And that's also taking into account what happened to Leclerc on that first lap, all the way to the back. Great drive to get back up into the top 5. I still just think it's a lot has to go kind of wrong, because the thought of neither Red Bull being in the top 4, that's tough, because that's kind of what has to happen if Mercedes is 1-2. Something's got to be in there to block the Ferraris. Yeah. So I don't think it's going to happen, but mad credit for getting this close this far in the season.
And of course, it all just sets it up nicely for 2023. People who've been supporting Mercedes and been slightly disappointed with their 2022 campaign, they can start getting excited about their 2023 campaign now, surely, Lawrence?
For sure. I think what's been so impressive is the development curve that they've had through this year. They were fighting at the low end of the midfield at points at the start of this year, and here we are, them fighing for victories
Lewis,
at the end.
Do you get a point for 10th? Yeah. Do you remember that? Oh my gosh.
Which is great. Well, how often has he been around those kind of positions in the field?
George Russell, you are a Formula One race winner. tears in the eyes, tears of jubilation and celebration for George Russell here today.
We've got everyone in Abu Dhabi this weekend, so it's only right to bring them into the weekend warm-up, and it is cosy now. I like it. We're all together in the paddock, ready to talk about 2022 as a whole. Jolyon Palmer, great to have you with us on the weekend warm-up. Former Formula One driver, let's have your thoughts first and foremost on your highlights for 2022.
It's been great overall. New regulations. I mean, you guys have probably covered it all.
No, we haven't actually. We've been talking about the close battles up and down the field still as we come into the season finale. But I think the rules have played a part.
What I like is that overtaking has become more easier with these rules. You can definitely follow more closely. We could see it early on. I think my highlight is probably like Jeddah, when you had a title fight still on, which has been the bit of a shame about this weekend and a bit the end of the season. But at that point it was very much on Leclerc and Verstappen, new rivalry, really epic fight all the way to the flag.
And Will Buxton joining us on the weekend warm-up, final time this year. We're all together looking back across a season that has had some serious excitement.
Yeah, so similar to Jolyon, I loved the early season battles between Charles and Max because it's so rare that you get two drivers from two different teams, P1, P2, actually going wheel to wheel for the win, and it happening race after race after race. I love that. But what I've really enjoyed is with the new regulations, and not just the cars that they've given us, but the financial regulations, the restriction on aero, on wind tunnel time, on CFD, meant that even a team like Mercedes, the might of Mercedes, couldn't just throw money at the problem. It took them from the start of the season to the penultimate race to create a race-winning car. And I think that shows tremendous sort of potential for the future that, yes, the field will come together. It will be harder if a Red Bull or a Ferrari next season don't quite get it right for them to catch it up, and that eventually everyone will start to bunch up and will get a tighter field. It was never going to happen in one season. But everything we've seen is that it is harder to make good on the early mistakes. And I think that's really positive for the sport in terms of just bringing the field together.
Yeah, exciting times ahead.
Yeah.
2023 looking good already. Lawrence, what about you then? What do you see as your highlight of the season?
I think it's been our first time winners. I think Carlos in Silverstone, George in Brazil, I think it opens up so much opportunity for them now. They've kind of got that out of their system now. They've got it on the board. And you can see with Carlos in particular how much he's gained from winning that race. Hopefully the same will happen for George. And if the field does close up like we're talking about in the years to come, then it's, I think, really important that they're in the mix as well with their teammates, Charles and with Lewis, and hopefully Red Bull will be up there as well. I think that's great. I think that's what I'm excited about now going forward.
And Hinch, what about you? Only with us for a few races, but you've been an aficionado of F1 for a while, and of course, so much experience. So you've probably enjoyed seeing the drivers take on these new cars maybe as well?
That's just it. I mean, to kind of Jolyon's point, these new cars, I think, have really just sort of revolutionized the sport in a lot of ways, mixed in with the rules, the way the cost cap works with the reverse development, because to your point, that Mercedes can't just throw money at a problem. You had a team like Haas come out of the gates kicking because they had so much more wind tunnel and CFD time available to them to develop these new rules. The cars look better, they race better, and it really just has set up a really exciting year. Yes, Max won too many races, arguably, but throughout, we still have some great battles throughout the field. Even when he's dominating a race, there's some great races on track, some great battles on track. So from an entertainment standpoint, I think the sport's in a great spot and going in a great direction, and that field is just gonna tighten up over next year. So I'm already excited about 23.
And those good-looking cars are going to look great under the lights here in Abu Dhabi. So what are the predictions this weekend then, guys? Jolyon,
what was your highlight?
This very moment. This very moment.
Anything for the present.
I've actually dreamed of this all season. And finally, we got the band together. Jolyon, predictions. Come on, tell me what you're thinking.
I think Verstappen will close out the season with a win. So I say Max, Lewis chasing him hard.
So we won't get that win. The one win every season.
2021 again. I think it might elude him. I think Red Bull are going to be strong here. So I'm going to say Max, Lewis, and then maybe Leclerc third, Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari podium, and Leclerc gets second in the championship.
Oh, okay, you're going strong on that one. Okay, let's go Lawrence next.
I'm struggling to look past Max for a win, but I do think Lewis is going to be strong here, so maybe a legit. So let's go Lewis, Max, Checo.
So you think he's going to get that win? Oh my goodness. Coming to you last, don't you worry. Hinch, what about you?
All right, I'll mix it up. I do agree Red Bull's going to be strong, but I'm going to give it to Checo. I'll put Lewis second, Max third.
Oh, I was worrying you were going to have to say Max is going to give a lead to Checo to. Oh, my goodness.
That's probably one position. I know what he said in the press conference, but that's probably one thing he wouldn't do.
You ain't no fool. I like that. And so P2 again, sorry, for the drivers would
Lewis. Oh, so for the drive, well, if Checo wins, it'd be him
it'll be
for
Checo. Yeah, lovely. Okay, Will, come on then.
I don't know about.
Did you play the lottery again this week? 'Cause
No,
I loved that
I
last
didn't.
week.
No,
Okay.
I didn't. I'm not going to make a prediction of what I think is going to happen. This is what I'd like to happen. I'd like Lewis to round out the season with a win and keep that roll going, because as someone who's defined his era, it's such a great record to have. And I would just, for his sake, for the team's sake, what they've done, I'd love him to just get that, just to sign off the season. I'd like Ferrari to get on the podium. Charles or Carlos, I don't mind, just because they've had a bit of a difficult run in the latter stages of this season, and I would like Seb to sign off his F1 career in third place on the podium with the applause of the grandstand, which is no less than he deserves.
Okay, no, I'm redoing mine. It's going to be Seb Ricardo, Latifi. That's the podium.
Mick in fourth.
Yeah.
Mick in
and
fourth.
Mick in fourth.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. Oh, wouldn't that be nice? All the storylines just tied up nicely for 2022. As we know, it's Formula One. That won't happen. None of our predictions will happen either.
Never do.
But join us over the course of the weekend here in Abu Dhabi. We'll be taking you behind the scenes from Hinch, from Jolyon, Will, Lawrence, and me, Rosanna Tennant. It's goodbye now, though.